Hello and welcome to NM Enterprise 7. Today I have a special guest, none other than Mr. Samuel Cubbage. He is a credit specialist, entrepreneur, and certified life coach. And he recently completed a book honoring his father, something that we don't always talk about on the channel, but today we are. Sam serves as a marketing and promotions director of the CCI radio show, seen on YouTube. He also has several audio shows back to the 80s, Love Notes, and a show he co-hosts with his wonderful wife, Bobby, called Crazy People Follow Us. And, of course, the book. This is a tribute to his late father, Samuel J. Cubbage Sr., titled, Hey Boy, a tribute to my dad, Samuel J. Cubbage Sr. Well, welcome. Welcome, Samuel.
Well, Nicole, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here today.
Absolutely. So one of the things that I will tell you when I was just looking at as well as reading this book, I was thinking about my own relationship with my dad. I was thinking about my listeners and over the years, the challenges that they've had with their own fathers.
Mm-hmm.
But you have been that person who has exemplified the good son, the son who honors his father, the son with the great memories and all of that. And sometimes we just don't hear enough of that. We don't observe enough of that, depending on what our upbringing was like. And so it was very touching to read your book. And I just wanted to talk about the book, but I also have other questions to help those individuals who might be struggling with their own sons, as well as sons who they don't have the best relationship with their fathers.
Mm-hmm.
So I was curious. One of the first things that I noticed in the book was one of your memories where your dad, he leaves for a month and he's absent from you and your mother. Could you expound upon that? What was going on at that time?
Yeah, what was actually going on at that time is it was a situation where my dad was more or less needed. He's actually from a little town in Virginia called Luray, Virginia,
Mm-hmm.
which is in the Shenandoah Mountains. So his boss and company, they needed somebody down in that particular area or around there in some part of Virginia, might not even been Luray, but they chose him because it was supposed to be like a month, maybe like a month or two assignment. So he had to leave. So at that time, of course, my mom was kind of like, well, do you really have to leave? And he says, yeah, they have me on this assignment. What I can probably come home on the weekends, which might have been a little bit hard. So I know that I remember me being as young as I was at that time.
How old were
just
you?
in my book, I said, Dad,
Mm-hmm.
do you really have to leave? Do you really have to go? And that's, of course, part of the statement that I put in my book.
Mm-hmm.
And he said that he had to go because that's where the job was putting him at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And he said like I said, he could try to be home on the weekends. And when he did leave, it was really, for me, it was kind of hard. And my mom, she understood me, not so much. I was like, all upset, like, Dad's not coming home tonight. Each day I'm like, Dad's not coming home. Dad's not coming home. But the thing is, my dad did call us like once or twice a week or whatnot, and just to check on us. And then it got to a point where he just said to the company that, what, I can't be away from my family
Mm-hmm.
for this long. So whatever he said, other than that, weeks later, He pulled up in the driveway, just around about the same time he would come home from work.
Right.
And he said, guess what? He says, I don't have to do that job in Virginia no more. They're going to find me and put me on whatever I can do here. So me being like the happiest go lucky kid, I mean, I gave him the biggest hug and I said, oh, Dad, I'm so happy, and my mom was all happy. And it was just the greatest thing knowing that he was able to get reassigned back home, because that was really hard.
I bet. How old were you approximately?
Man, if I had to take a stab at it, I would probably say, well, maybe like around, I'm trying to think here, I don't know if it was elementary school, maybe like 7 or 8, maybe, if I had to gauge.
Okay. Yeah, that's an impressionable age. Absolutely. Yeah. So you're growing up in this household. Can you kind of give us like what it was like growing up in the household, some of the things that you noticed about your mom and dad's relationship? Because even though when we're kids, they tell us things like, stay in a child's place and you go play with your toys and things like that. I'm sure that if you were observant like me, you were kind of paying attention to some things. So what were you learning about mom and dad's relationship growing up?
Well, number one, I was the only child.
Okay.
So pretty much I had free reign to pretty much do what I want. But just as you kind of said there, I mean, every parent would have their arguments, but my parents probably would have more, I wouldn't say arguments, they were probably just disagreements, and there really weren't that many disagreements. And they never really got in the topic of like finances or anything in front of me, but what they always did in front of me, like we always got together, for like the family meals, whether it be breakfast and dinner, or we always went out to dinner and, just sat on the back porch as a family. And, sometimes we would take, trips to Virginia or wherever they would think about going. So I don't know if that pretty much answers that.
Yeah, it does.
Just basically, I just had free reign, and I pretty much just like stood in was in my room a lot, just listening to my music. And because like I said, my parents really didn't argue too much, but I was just trying to stay out of their way.
Right.
And just do what I wanted.
And this would have been around the 1980s, right? Where you've got a lot of the family TV sitcoms going on, right? Or
yeah, I mean, I can kind of the 80s would be right. Because I remember, funny story is something I didn't put in my book here, but
okay, yeah, do tell.
I remember when the Cosby Show debuted. And of course, everybody who's a big fan of the Cosby Show, remember when it debuted. I remember that's the same night that I had an open house at school. And I was thinking, okay, number one, this is a bad night, and then whenever in my mind I'm thinking open house, I'm thinking, I did something wrong. No, it wasn't like that at all. It's just the fact that of course. The parents had to meet the teacher, and the teacher was pretty much just telling them what a good person or what a good kid I was in class. I never gave them any problems. And I mean, it's not that we were in class long, but for what they saw of me right there and then, they were just praising me and,
Absolutely. There was something that came to mind, and we share a similarity here. My dad was U.S. Army, and then when I read your book, I'm like, oh, wow, your dad was a U.S. Army veteran. My dad was a sergeant, and
nice.
Yeah, and so you already know what that household was like. I mean, I was standing at attention and all of that. And then you talked about your dad serving as a helicopter gunner during the Vietnam War, and then around that time, my dad he was waiting for orders out there in Frankfurt, Germany during the Vietnam War. So I was just like, oh wow. So of course I was I was wondering, like, did you see some of the military types of personality showing up in his parenting? Like what I experienced growing up. Did you happen to see that transfer, or did he, like, once he came out the military, he just went, right into that civilian life, and you really never saw the military side of him?
Yeah, that's pretty much it. Because there was a time when he came out the army, it was just basically civilian. I mean, he really didn't want to talk too much about what his time spent in the army, but he did say a lot of places that he's been. He's been to Korea, he's been to Vietnam, he's been to Germany. He was also like a PT instructor as well, so that's where I got a lot of my physical training, if you will, from him, which I hated because my dad was hardcore, and my dad would be like, okay, I mean, he got like me the biggest and most hard weights to use. Like, he actually started off like getting me these weights that had water in them, like you would put water in the weights. And for, at the time, I'm a kid, those things are so heavy.
Right.
And my dad was like, pick it up, boy. So I'm trying to pick it up, and he's like, all right, now, I guess this would be his military mentality, because he would be like, all right, I want you to give me 20. I'm like, 20 what? He's like, 20 curls. And I'm like, these are dumbbells. These things are really heavy. So I'm struggling with them. I barely got the 4.
Oh, my goodness.
And he would say, okay, he would not stop. He's like, okay, you did 4 today. Tomorrow I want you to do 4 more. And then after that, it would just kind of just increase every day. But he was really hardcore when it came to that. Like, my dad was a no-nonsense person, but like I said, he was straight civilian, when he got out of the army. And even my thoughts of even, maybe wanting to go into the military when I was a junior in high school.
Right.
He shut that down immediately. He said, no, I don't want you going to the military just based off of the things that I've experienced. So that's a no.
Yeah, my dad, same thing. Like, first it was the Army, and then I was like, well, Dad, what about the Army? And he was like, no. And then I said, oh, okay, well, I'm talking to the Marine. He was like, definitely no. And I was like, oh, man. Because, see, he had conditioned myself and my sister with the lifting of those cement bags and dumping the cement in the wheelbarrow and lifting that and lifting bricks. You know how Pittsburgh is with those brick walls? So if a wall came down, we were out there and we were putting our wall back up again. So, yeah, I know about that hardcore fitness, type of stuff. Like, girl, I'm not coming to get you. You can walk those hills. It's like,
that was not fun.
Right? I said, these kids are blessed. Oh, my goodness. Wow. So, okay. One of the things that I noticed, too, was a lot of talk about the beagles. Okay? And, I could almost picture how these dogs are running around and, having to feed them, care for them, train them, all of that. These ribbons that you talk about, the recognition. You want to talk a bit about these pets and what was going on and all that good stuff?
Yeah, that more or less was a hobby that my dad had gotten when he was a little bit younger. And since he was in the country, there were people down there that would go to these events called field trials. And what a field trial is, it's going to sound kind of crazy to some people, but what it is you're out in the woods, and the whole objective of having a beagle and or a harehound, which are 2 hunting dogs, their objective would be to hunt and try to see if they can find a rabbit.
Okay.
Not so much to injure the rabbit, just to see if they can either trap the rabbit, because rabbits they can jump in their own hole, like if they, they're in a rabbit hole or whatnot. And once they're cornered, once they're in the hole, dogs can't get them. They just stand there and bark. But when they had these field trials, they set them up where kind of like these car races are, and I'm just kind of using that as an example. When you watch NASCAR, for example, you get, or maybe even, I think maybe a better example would be horse racing.
Okay.
Then you get first place, second place, third place, fourth place, whatever. So in field trials, you would have first, second, third, fourth. Now, fifth wouldn't really be called fifth. It would be called NBQ, which is called next best qualifier, which means that, well, your dog placed, but, it's really, you get something out of it. So it's almost like you really didn't, you got something, but it really wasn't like the top of the line or something like that. So, but I kind of, when I was smaller, my dad trained me how to do that stuff, and I had a lot of fun with it when I was younger. And we used to go to all these different field trial events, out of all these different beagle clubs, if you will.
Yeah.
And it was a lot of fun because you start off with the trial, and then the dogs will run around for whatever, and then after a while, you would grab your dogs, and field trials probably could last a couple hours, more or less. So you and quite a few other people like let their dogs loose, and then once the dogs are done, or once they had these actual judges, that would walk the grounds, and once the judges would say, okay, go get your dogs, so then you start hollering for your dog or dogs, depending on how many you had in there. So once you grab your dogs, you put them away. And then, of course, we were always all treated to like a nice lunch, which is something I always loved. So, you're standing out there in the woods for so long, like whether it be like a hot day or whether it be like a cool day, and you're like, dang, I didn't eat yet. So, they would have these nice homemade breakfasts. Somebody would actually be in the kitchen cooking, so that was good.
So this was a big deal.
Yeah.
Like a whole production. I thought it was awesome that he made those dog kennels, and I mean the dogs had luxury. I mean, you were talking about dog mansions, dog hotels, bales of straw.
Yes.
The money and the time and the energy that he put into the Cubbage's Beagles was amazing.
Yeah, we actually decided to. Well, now this was actually my mom's idea, I think. My dad was talking about, actually my mom said, you know what, you need to have something representing what you do. And it wasn't like it was a business, but it's just the fact that those are his Beagles, Cubbage is the last name. So then mom actually had created a hat and a shirt back then that said Cubbage's Beagles. And the hat had pictures of beagles running around like in a field, actually chasing a rabbit. And I was like, this is pretty cool.
Right.
So I actually had one of those hats back then, and when my dad and I would go to these field trials, a lot of times we would wear those hats and wear our shirts, and just sporting our merchandise, if you will say that. And then, just to kind of conclude the field trials, once the judges kind of go through and see like what dog did the best percentage, I guess, of trying to find the rabbit or the closest to finding the rabbit, that's when they decide, like, well, they had trophies and they had ribbons. So the trophies would be for the actual field trial, like, oh man, your dog is the best hunting dog ever. So believe it or not, our dogs were so good, my dad and I really never got less than, well, very rarely would he get fourth. He would always get first or second.
Yeah, that's what I noticed too. I was like, these weren't just any dogs. These were dogs that were groomed and treated in such a way where they were winning awards, and that's a big deal. I was curious, because you all spent so much time working with the animals and so forth. How do you think that transferred into like your work ethic, how you care for others, just anything that from that time period that you learned that you could be able to implement into your own hobbies, passions, work, all of that good stuff?
Well, I will tell you this. I wouldn't say that I implemented that into my work ethic, but I will tell you when I was still in college,
Mm-hmm.
um, in my effective speaking, I think it was effective speech class, we were doing presentations, and
Mm-hmm.
then I was trying to figure out what type of presentation to do. So what I did was I decided to do the presentation of Coverage's Beagles. So I took the baseball cap into the classroom, and of course, we're using VCRs back then.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I actually took in a VCR. So I popped in the VCR, and I was demonstrating this in front of the class, and of course, the class was kind of like, I have no idea what I'm looking at, but I'm trying my best to explain it and everything, and I think they appreciated that, even though they might have been slightly confused. But it worked out very well. I didn't even get an A, but my professor gave me a B only because some of the people were confused in the class.
Oh.
And which is fine. I mean, I was fine with it. But I will tell you this. When I told my dad what I was going to do in my class, he was so elated. He said, "Wow, boy, you're really going to do that?" And I said, "Yeah." So I told him exactly what happened in the class, and he was so proud that I showed what he did.
Exactly. So how would you describe him? How would you describe your dad?
My dad was a man's man. My dad was a no-nonsense person. He didn't like anybody talking, of course, like any father. He was very protective of his family because one of the things my dad always said, the thing that matters to me is you, your mom, and me. At least that's how he started off. But then, of course, when Bobby and I started seeing each other, and then when Bobby and I got married, he says, "Okay, so now what's important is you, your mom, me, and your wife." So he only cared about, his family, and he didn't want anybody talking bad about his family. He didn't want anybody taking advantage of his family. And my dad was very giving because every snowfall, we used to have an elderly husband and wife that lived on my street.
Okay.
So my dad would actually go down the street with his shovel, and he would go down there and shovel their driveway, shovel their walkway, and then sometimes he would shovel a couple other people's driveways or walkways just to kind of help them out as well. And if somebody needed something, like, hey, like their lawnmower wasn't working, or their furnace might have been on the brink, or water was leaking somewhere, like, he would always be one of the first ones to jump in and see, well, let me take a look at it and see if there's anything I can do or I can suggest. So he was always like that. So yeah, very giving person.
Yeah, I read that when you spoke of him being that way. Were there times where you observing your dad saying like, why are you going down there helping them, or like, how kids sometimes we see things and we don't understand, and then later on parents will come and explain some things. Were there times like that where you were just questioning like, Dad, why are you doing this?
Yeah, there was, because actually, one of my the neighbors that still lives on my parents' street. If she heard this, she'd probably kill me. But the thing is, my dad was always over there. I can't say a lot, but he would always be giving advice and lending things. And there's things that he's lent or did that he never really got recognition for.
Okay.
even in his passing.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess I can kind of say that, but the majority of the people, everybody else, that he's helped. I mean, like I say, he wasn't asking for anything, but the fact is, if he's lending somebody something or giving, whether it's money or a lawnmower or a weed whacker or a ladder or something, at least you can do is kind of acknowledge, oh, thank you so much. Without this, I wouldn't have been able to do, whatever it is I needed to do.
Exactly. Right. And sometimes people, they tend to not appreciate that about folks. It's just like, well, the entitlement kicks in.
Right.
Uh-huh. So there's your dad. He's helping out different people. He's just a good Samaritan, like what you described him as in your book. So some of this, I'm sure, is transferring onto you. And you're like, okay, I mean, I like what Dad is doing here. And so what would you say were some things that you did where your dad is like, see, you got it. That's my son.
Well, the one thing that I take after my dad, and I would say is a good work ethic.
Mm-hmm.
Because, when I was younger, I would either work, I would have these little, like, jobs that, you would work maybe a few hours a day. You're trying to find something full time, but, you're young and you're like, okay, I'm going to get what I can get. I don't want to just kind of sit around here and do nothing and not make any money.
Mm-hmm.
So, there was times when I would work at a grocery store. Of course, that was my main job at the time. Mm-hmm. And then I would work, at the radio station or stations because I was asked to work at two so, when I was working on weekends, like once or twice a week or sometimes filling in. If someone called and said, hey, we're short-staffed today, can you come in? I will always be the one, like even on my days off at the grocery store I was working with, I would always be there. There's times when I worked like 7 or 8 days straight just because, they couldn't find anybody to work, or even just on my off day, I might even go up there just to shop. Mm-hmm. And then they would see me there. Well, not that I care, because I mean, it's the closest grocery store,
right,
to home. And it's like, hey, Sam, how you doing? Hey, what are you doing right now? I'm like, shopping. Well, and I'm like looking at the lines and everything. I'm like, wow, these lines are really long. They look like they don't have any cashiers here today. And then they're calling me to just, hey, can you come to the office for a second?
Yeah.
And then they would say to me, I know this is your off day, but do you think you can come in for just a couple hours to kind of help out? Mm-hmm. And I'm like kind of chuckling. I was like, what time you want me here? Because, there's times when we would either close at 9 p.m. or 10 p.m. So it's like, can you come in at 7 and stay till close? Right. I'm like, what am I doing? Uh-huh. I'm just sitting there, like either watching TV or going to a mall. I'm like, I can make some money. I can go to the mall later.
Right.
So, even to this day, if they ask to work like extra hours or just do extra things, I get all that from my dad. I feel I have a very good work ethic, and I really get that from him. So I really thank him for that.
Yeah, absolutely. I like that story that you have in your book about the knocking down the pit.
I was wondering if you want to get to that.
Yeah, absolutely. We were going to get to that. That was a good story because I'm sitting there and I'm like towards the end. I'm like, what? I mean, I don't want to ruin it, but certain folk wanted that done, and and I was just like, wow. See, now that's a good son moment. Let's talk about that. I mean, because that's not easy. Knocking down a barbecue pit that's made of brick, right? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It was. Well, yeah, that story there was probably one of my favorite stories in the book. And I remember, and my parents had one of the best barbecue pits, and that barbecue pit had sat out in the yard when they bought the house.
Mm-hmm.
And it got to a point where my dad was like, you know what? I just want to change some things around. This barbecue pit's an eyesore. I want it tore down.
Mm-hmm.
And at first I thought that he was joking. But then when I realized he wasn't, and then he actually bought a grill and had it sitting on the back porch, and I'm like, you really want to tear down this grill? And I kept saying this. He said, yeah, I want this tore. I need this tore down. So, of course, they draft me to, well, I should say he drafts me to start tearing down this pit. So the first couple of hits on this thing, I was like, this thing is hard. So I'm only knocking down one brick. And then here's my mom comes outside. And she was like, wait a minute. She's like, I know you're not hitting it like that. Come on, put some force into it. She's like, hit that thing, hit it. So I'm like, okay, so now I'm getting mad at her because I feel like she's telling me what to do.
Mm-hmm, right.
So it took me a few days to knock this thing down completely. So I'm just hitting it. And it got to a point where, Bobby at the time had just came over to visit me. And we were actually supposed to go out somewhere. We were supposed to go out to like a movie or dinner.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, well, I don't know when I'm going to be able to do that because my dad wants me to knock down this pit. And she was like looking at me every hit with the mallet I had. She was like, why are you doing that? And I'm like, nah, my parents want me to tear this down. And I'm getting more angry every hit that I'm putting on this thing. And then it finally got to the last day. And the last day, I was like, I'm so sick of this thing. So I kept muttering, and I'm putting every ounce of strength I have in the hits. And I finally knocked this thing down, like the last couple of bricks. And then my dad comes home.
Mm-hmm.
And he looks at it and he says, great job, son. You did a great job. Mm-hmm. And I'm just looking at it, like, I'm so tired right now.
Yeah.
And then that's when he says, actually, it wasn't me who wanted you to tear the pit down.
That was
your
the
mom.
trip down part. Yeah. I didn't want to give it away. Yeah.
I said, what? So I was even more mad. And then she was standing there and I said, you had me do this? And she said, yeah, why do you think I was on you like every day to say, put some force in that thing. Don't be weak and hitting that thing. Let me show you. She even grabbed the thing the first day and even
trying to show
me how to hit it.
Yeah. The woman grabs the mallet and shows the man how to hit a brick barbecue pit.
I was so mad.
Oh, man.
Yeah. I was so heated. I couldn't get that out of my mind.
But the thing is I was thinking that to me was like a Karate Kid moment, like a wax on, wax off. Okay, now what are we gonna do with this story? Where are we going with this? Are we talking about perseverance? Are we learning patience? Are we learning discipline? I mean, what did you take from it?
Well, that pit was hard knocking down, so I would say it gave me strength. Because each day I sat there and I kept hitting it. I was getting strength and I was getting more confidence that I could knock it down without anybody helping me. And plus, the mallet that they gave me was way heavier than me. But I just felt like I just kept getting stronger with each hit. Well, that and I was mad too, but I was able to knock it down. So I would say it gave me strength and determination.
It's interesting how our parents will assign tasks to us, and then there's something bigger behind the scenes that's happening, and we don't realize it, but it plays a part in who we are, in our personalities, and how we deal with things. There was something that I had discussed with Bobby, and kind of moving away a little bit from some of the questions that I wanted to ask you. And that is because one of the things I know my listeners, they're not mentioning anything about children. You want to talk about that? Like, was your dad putting any pressure on you about, grandbabies or grandsons or, anything like that? Or did he just respect the fact that, hey, this is something that if my son wants to do it, he wants to do it. And if he doesn't, he doesn't.
Yeah. I mean, at first it was like that. Mm-hmm. But then after a while, it was more or less like you said. If it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, it doesn't. Mm-hmm. And he just seemed, after a while, he just seemed really content with just the way things are. Mm-hmm. and were.
Exactly. Yeah. Was there something that you noticed about your dad that really stood out that said, my dad, he really loves his family? Like, he's just different from a lot of guys that are out there. Were there any moments like that?
My dad was very stern. Mm-hmm. And whenever he told you something, mm-hmm. he wasn't really going to repeat it, because he would even say to me, I'm going to tell you this, I'm not going to repeat it, but I'm just going to tell you this one time. Mm-hmm. If my dad didn't like something, he would basically tell you that. So yeah, him being a really stern person, I would say he was a very strong person. Mm-hmm. And like I said earlier in the conversation, he was really a no-nonsense man's man type of person. Just a person that you, like, not just me, but anybody would admire and would just want to be like. Because there was a couple of my friends that I had, just, man, your dad is just really cool. And I'm like, even though I told my dad this, my dad's like, wow, is that what they said to you? Because, my dad really didn't, there's times when he really didn't talk much, or he just say hello, and they just figured, well, your dad is just real cool. And I told him that, I guess, he was really appreciative of the fact that they thought he was cool. Mm-hmm. And so do I.
Was there ever a time where someone approached you all wrong, maybe at a family event, or you're going somewhere and you're just like, oh, here comes that side of dad. That's the protector. He loves his family. He's the kind of person that I don't know. I hope we don't have to call the police. I mean, did you ever see a moment like that?
Yeah. Okay. Actually, I can probably give you a couple examples. One of the examples was when I was in middle school. Mm-hmm. And we were at a grocery store, and there was always somebody there. Like, it was always somebody that lived in the neighborhood that I would see on the school bus every Monday through Friday, who would always just tease me because I lived in a different area. Like, I lived down the hill from, the projects.
Oh, okay.
And they just felt like he thinks he's better than us. So they would just tease me. They would just call me, of course they would call me third base because of, one of the hottest, rap groups out back then.
That's right.
Or they would just call me, they would just get on me because I was light. Mm-hmm. And, thought I was light. And that part got to me. But then my dad standing there, my dad always said to whoever, he would step up and say, now, I'm going to tell you something. You talking about my kid, you better leave my kid alone. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Or else, it's always like that or else bit, because my dad he wouldn't mince words, and he would not talk very long about it, but he would just probably give you like a 10 to 20 second, either you better get out our way, or you better leave me alone, or leave us alone, or else, and that's it.
That's right. Yeah. Was there a time where you knew that he was a man of faith, or he believed in something bigger than himself?
Well, I would say this. My dad wasn't really a church-going person, but what he did believe that there was a higher calling and a higher power, because he always did say that to me. And he never took away anybody going to church, because my dad, of course, has attended churches before.
Right.
And one of the last visits that we had to his town in Luray, Virginia, it was me, my mom, and Bobby, and we went to his church down. I can't quite remember what the name of the church was, but we did go to a Sunday morning church service because it was a reunion. And he stood up there and he introduced himself to the congregation, saying, "Yes, my name is Samuel Covage, Senior." And of course, those of you may know me by my nickname, Junie. And there were some people in that audience that realized who he was. And he says, "Yes, I am a member of this church, and this is my wife, this is my son, and this is my daughter-in-law. And we're here. We're here from Pittsburgh. We're here for the reunion." And he did go to our church a couple times as well, making his grand entrance. And I say that kind of funny because when my dad used to roll into places, my dad would make an impression. He rolled into church, meaning our church. He had his blue jeans, his cowboy boots, his black Stetson. And all them, it's like I almost felt like I had to beat the women off with a stick.
Oh, yeah.
Because he walked in and I was like, "Who is this fine looking man here?" And I was like, and Bobby sitting there, "That's my father-in-law you talking about now." And I'm sitting here, I told my dad this too. I was like, "Yeah, you have all the women, all the congregation, everybody looking at you and everything." And I said, "Yeah." I said, "Yeah, if I probably had to beat the women off the stick." And he was like, "Yeah, because your daddy was there, hey boy."
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Wow. So I want to kind of switch gears a little bit and talk about Mom, because hey, I mean, he's got this hat on, he's got these, the boots, and he's got women all around, and I looked at that picture, I was like, yeah, and he was not an ugly man, audience, okay? He was very nice looking. So the thing is that behind every great man is this even greater woman, right?
Right.
What role did your mother play in strengthening your relationship with your dad?
I would actually, that's a very good question. Basically, she just kind of let me and my dad do the father and son thing, if that makes any sense, because
it does.
Whatever, she went interfering in a lot of different things that related to me and him. But, of course, as you were saying about how he was all dressed up and came to our church, and she would always say, "Oh boy." Now, she already knew, she would just kind of chuckle like, "Yeah, that's my husband. I know how he is. That's that Southern charm." And my dad had like the greatest laugh, the greatest smile, the greatest accent, even though he didn't think he did, because he thought his accent left years ago, but it didn't. And even myself, I would ask him, "Say that again." I just want to hear what he say.
That Southern dialect.
So, yeah, I would say just my mom just let me and my dad be as we are.
Exactly. That's a good thing, because some moms, they can interfere and don't realize that they're interfering. So moms out there, let the sons and the fathers connect and just kind of sit back in the background.
Yeah, exactly. Like I said, other than just going to the field trials, Dad and I would we go to breakfast. sometimes we go out to dinner. Not that he would try to not include my mom, but there are just certain times when he's just like, "You know what, boy, let's go. Yeah, let's go some ice cream or something. Let's hang out." So we did little things like that.
I noticed that father-son bond with the Bob Evans and the Hosses back in the day, and then going off with the shopping list, and you wanted to, mom wanted you all to pick up some things, and instead Sam's getting everything in the store, but
Oh yeah, that's another one.
I thought that was cool because I have a couple of sons who their dad used to do that kind of thing. When Toys R Us was around, he would make sure that they had anything that they wanted, and I'm like, and how did that get paid for?
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. Yeah, my dad would just let me get anything I wanted. Did not care about price. My dad did not believe in coupons. He said, "You just get whatever you want because you're with me." And I'm like, "Okay, I'm going to hear about it later."
Over the years, I saw the public posts, and you were alongside of him during some very touching moments. I was surprised. See, the thing about social media is it reminds me of like a soap opera sometimes. You see a family together, everybody's smiling. It's the holidays. You mentioned how Christmas time was very special. And all the good smells and all that good stuff. And then the next thing I know, one day I look at your public post and I'm like, what? Like you were right next to your dad and he was ill. And I'm like, so can you like tell me at that particular time as you're putting up these posts, tell us what was going on around that time?
You mean the time when he first became ill? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, if you want to start there, because there was a progression there. Absolutely.
Yeah, I can. Yeah, I have no problems. Talking about that. So it's kind of weird because the way that it seemed to start was my dad had gone down to. Now it was just him by himself. Mm-hmm. He had gone down to Luray. He said this was going to be the final time he would get down there because it was another reunion. It was another reunion. And everything was fine when he went down there, but when he went down there, he happened to notice that his childhood house that he grew up in was torn down. And that's somehow seemed to, I don't know if that was part of it, but I remember him calling me. We were having a party for me. And, he was, of course, in Virginia, so he calls me. And I say, "Hey, Dad." And he says, "Hey, son." I say, "Hey, how's your trip going?" He says, "They tore down my childhood house." And I said, "What?" And I said, "Oh, Dad, I'm sorry about that." And he says, "Well, nothing you can do." I think that sort of triggered something in my dad because a month later, I remember getting a call from my mom when I was getting home from work, and she said that Dad had a stroke, or he might have had a stroke. Wasn't sure. So they checked him out, and so he must have had like a mini stroke because that's what they were stating. Now I can't figure out because this happened more than once, but I can tell you that the one time that Bobby and I saw him, he was back in his bedroom, and of course how your face starts to droop. So I'm trying to figure out if that was the first time or the second time. I'm going to say that's the first. Okay. So, but then it only seemed to last 24 hours because after that, he didn't lose any memory or anything like that. So he seemed to snap out of that. But then a month after that, he had like another mini stroke, and they took him to the hospital, but they were able to bring him back home. So he went back home. He was laying in the bed. So again, I'm coming from work. Bobby's coming with me. So we go see him at home. He's back in the bed. Everything's fine. And I was just telling him, like, I'm glad you're okay. And I said, Dad, I think you had a mini stroke. And he was like, is that what happened? And he's like, yeah. I said, that's Bobby and I were trying to explain. From what we understand, that's what may have happened to you.
Mm-hmm.
So that's that. But then other things started happening where he would go down into the garage and he would try to get into my mom's truck, but he didn't know, he couldn't remember how to start the vehicle, but then he started moving like the windshield wipers and everything, and then he figured out how to get the garage door open. And this is late at night now.
Ooh.
And yeah,
scary.
So he basically started walking up the street. And I think this might have been around 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. And then my mom was like looking for him. She hears the garage door open. And so, of course, my mom, being like the fastest person she could be at that time, she got up and she started walking up the street and found him. I mean, he didn't get very far. And then she pulled him back, and I don't know what he was looking for, but she brought him back home. And then he started doing those things again, like trying to escape. Like he went out of the house again, probably a couple days later, but just all he did was he went out the back door, and then next thing you know, he's ringing the doorbell because it was cool outside, and then she opened the door and he's like, "It's cool out here." Or it's cold out here. So she opened the door, let him back in. So it was those things right there that he was doing that over and over and over. And it just got to a point where my mom really couldn't control that. So we were trying to figure out exactly what to do to help him. So that's when in 2017, January 2017, right at their 50th, and right around their 50th wedding anniversary or just before, is when my dad had entered the VA, but he wasn't a permanent resident there.
Oh, okay.
Yet, because we thought maybe he was just going to be there just for rehabilitation or whatever, but then after a couple of weeks, it got to a point where they noticed some things he was doing there, and they came down with the decision that he's not going to be able to stay home. He's going to have to stay there.
Okay.
Which, that was the hardest thing in the world to hear, because I had left work a little bit early to go to a meeting with my mom and the counselors at the VA in this room. And Dad was in the room with us all.
Okay.
And when they said that he's going to have to be a resident here, or I'm trying to think of the exact word they said, but pretty much he's going to have to stay here. And that was the hardest thing to hear, and the hardest thing to see my dad's face. I have never seen my dad get upset. I mean, he just literally cried, and I just, said to him, Dad, everything's just going to be okay. And he just, he just couldn't believe it. He didn't. He was just trying to figure out why, and he couldn't. And from that moment, like I said, from then on, he was just a permanent resident there. So of course, we go see him every weekend. My mom would pretty much see him almost every day, and then it got to the point where she would do it every day and then maybe cut back because She needed time for herself.
Right.
So, like I said, years and years and, weeks and weeks and years went on. And, there's times when it seemed like he was getting better, and then times when he was just like, okay, well, it's really not getting any better. Of course, you're in the back of your mind, you're trying not to think that way because you're trying to think positive thoughts.
Right.
But when they came down June 2021, and they said that actually it was probably about a few days before he passed. They said that, I think you all need to get here right now because they didn't think he was going to last the night. So we got there, and just by our presence being there, he got better. He was fine. He was sleeping, but it was kind of like a real labored sleep. But when we got there, he got real calm. He got better, like sleeping. And, I guess just knowing we were there.
Right.
But then, we got another call on June 16th of 2021. And they, actually, it might have been my mom that called. Yeah, my mom actually called us and said that we need to get over to the VA because they said that they don't think Dad's going to last the night. So Bobby and I, we live real close to it, so it only took us like 5 minutes to get there. Takes my mom a little bit longer, and we were waiting on her, but before we even got into the VA, and we didn't notice, he had already passed.
Wow, that time seemed to be pretty quick from the time. Yeah, from the time that you all got the call and then it happened.
Yeah, and when we got there, one of the nurses, that receptionist or nurses, she was telling us, and she said, she said, I'm sorry to say he passed. And, at first it didn't register,
right,
to all of us. And then we went upstairs to his room, and that's when it really, really hit to see him just laying there, and and I grabbed his hand, and that was just, it's still, it really, even though I'm looking at him and he's gone, and it was still like it was really hard and strange just to be like, here, this man who I thought was Superman to me, that was so invincible, that could withstand the test of time, is gone. And he had breathed his last breath before we got there. But the good news is, one of the nurses who has always been with him and checking on him, one of his buddies, I guess you can say, she was there when he passed, because she was holding his hand when she passed. So he wasn't alone, I will say that. But when we got there, the one thing I said to Dad was, I'm so sorry. And of course, my mom's like, well, what are you sorry for? I was like, I just didn't want to hear anything from anybody at that point, because, like I said, the greatest man I ever knew had passed away at that point.
Right. And
it was going to take every ounce of strength I had to try to get through that night. So we did, and when we were asked to leave the room because they were going to get his body together, and they were going to give him a little, like a military salute there at the VA, which they did, which was really, really great. I mean, they draped a a flag over, I think over his, I don't know if it was a bed or, I think it was over his bed. And they they gave Mom there was this veteran's hat that he had in his room, and Mom gave it to me.
Oh,
And I just kind of was like, I sort of smiled about it, but just watching them rolling, him covered up with this flag, it really is still, and it still wasn't surreal yet until even the funeral home to me wasn't really surreal until the funeral.
Okay. Was it like a?
I'm sorry, you were saying?
I was going to ask you, was it like an out of body experience for you? Like you were there but not really there, seeing all of this unfold? Like, I guess my biggest question is, how are you coping, being that you are a certified life coach? I mean, what's going through your mind?
Well, to be honest with you, what's going through my mind is it's still hard. I mean, you live with it, of course.
Of course.
There's days when I have my moments. I mean, I can just have random moments thinking about him. Or, I mean, I could be smiling one minute, I could be upset another moment, or it could be a mixture of both. But there could be times when I can just kind of sit and talk about it like now, and it doesn't really hurt me as much. But yeah, I mean, it's it's getting close to his 3-year passing mark, so that's going to be a little bit rough, only because the day that he passed is actually on Father's Day this year.
And that, I mean, when I asked you about this interview, I had no idea. So I was like, oh, I don't know if he's going to do it. Yeah, but I'm so grateful, more than you know, that you're willing to open up and share, because I know it is tough for sometimes for men to just be as candid as you are about everything. Did you have any dreams or signs or anything that prepared you for your father's departure prior to? Any strange things that you remember, like, this is it?
Not at all. None of those, but I will tell you this. I will tell you, not too long after he passed, he did come to me, in my dream.
Okay.
And plus there's times when I would, I can just kind of hear his voice, but he came to me in a dream, and he said, "Son, I'm okay." And that's all I needed to hear.
That's all right. That's
and
all right.
When he said that to me, in the dream, I dreamt him like touching my hand, or touching my shoulder. Putting this, because my dad would always put his hand on my shoulder. So I would say he put his hand on my shoulder.
Yeah, I had a dream about my mom in 2018 in October, when she had passed. This was after, and she showed up in a dream and told me she was okay and put her hand in my hand. And she was like 30-something in the dream. And once I got that, I was good. I just went on about my business. It was just like, I just needed a sign to know that everything was okay, because when she passed, we weren't talking. So that was one of those things where it was like, I know I made the right decision at that time in my life, but the reality kicked in, like, you're not going to be able to pick up the phone, and you're not going to see her again,
Right. Right.
But I knew I had to exhibit the kind of coping strategies where I've got to be here for my own family and be able to help others who not everybody's going to have that close relationship. And how do you survive, through the storm? But you and what you did leading up to being available, you post those photos, you let us know what his status was. We all felt like we were a part of your world. That's how powerful photos are. That's how powerful those posts are. And that's what ultimately led me to want to reach out to you, because it was like watching a show, but this is reality. It's not scripted. And that's what you presented to us. And so the likes and the comments and the prayers are with you. It was all genuine. I want you to know that. And
well, I appreciate that. That means a lot.
Every step of the way, we were watching, and it was just like, okay, now how's Sam doing? Is he? And then I'm looking around, and I'm like, okay, he's still, playing the music, and he's still putting up posts, and he's still got the book thing going on, and pandemic publishing, and okay, so he's good as long as he's good, Wow.
I mean, you just have to, you just have to keep living life, because, my dad wouldn't want me or us, the family, be sitting around just moping all the time. But, like I said, sometimes it's hard. Sometimes it's, people tell you, we're always told it gets easier. But, I would say it got a little bit easier, but it's yes and no. Everybody copes with things different ways. And, I have my own way of coping with it. But, for now, I would say I'm coping with it the best that I can.
Absolutely. And you're doing a good job keeping yourself busy, writing about it, talking about it, all of that good stuff. Those things are healthy. They are definitely healthy to do.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
So let's talk about some of those things where listeners can check out what you do. If you want to just run down the list, and this way they could be able to connect with you, leave some comments, listen to your podcast, all that good stuff.
Well, as you said at the beginning of the show, we do quite a few different things. So we have Pandemic Press Publishing. So you'll find any and all of our books there. If you go to pandemicpresspublishing.com, you will find it's a very detailed website. It'll tell you who Pandemic Press Publishing is. It'll give you a little background about us, meaning myself and my lovely wife, Bobby. It'll tell you about all the other shows that we do, the YouTube show, merchandise. There's a lot of different things there. I do a couple of audio shows. One of them is called Love Notes, and that is on Blog Talk Radio, SoundCloud, Spotify, and where podcasts are available. I'm also the host of the Back to the 80s podcast, and you can find that on the same outlets that I just said. I am also the music director for my wife's shows as well, for Gospel Excellence and for the Back to the 90s podcast. And we just started a brand new audio podcast, which is called Crazy People Follow Us. And we've got, great reviews on that already. People just can't believe the things that we said and the things that we came across on that show.
Yeah. I was like, what are they doing? Oh my goodness. So yeah, that one's a good one as well. Yeah,
Crazy People Follow Us. And then we have a YouTube channel. It's called the CCI Radio Show. And on that YouTube channel, you will find our live show that we do every Saturday morning at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. And it's called the CCI Radio Show with myself and Bobby. Also on that show, More content for you. We have Sam C's credit tips and etiquette class with Mrs. Covage. Those are rotating Wednesdays at 7:30 a.m. Eastern Time on our YouTube channel. You can also find Cooking Fun with Mrs. Covage every Friday at 4 p.m. Eastern on our YouTube channel. And also a great way to start your Tuesday. You can also find Tuesday Talks with Bobby D every Tuesday at 7:30 a.m. Eastern on our YouTube channel. And we try to tell people to click, like, share, and subscribe to our channel and hit that bell for notifications so you don't miss a thing. And we feel we have some pretty good content and things on our channel.
Yes, something to take you away from some of the heavier topics. Those that are on my channel, we get real heavy real quick. But if you want a bit of relief, then you head on over there to Sam's channel and Bobby's channel and just kind of forget about the troubles. So we're all working together, okay?
Yes.
Well,
we have a lot of fun on the channel.
Absolutely. Well, I thank you so much for taking the time out with us today, Samuel. I pray that everyone who's listening, that you heard how Sam talked about his dad and all of that good stuff. I mean, that basically is Bible. When you are that parent toward your son, toward your daughter, that is exemplifying righteousness, goodness, all of that good stuff. You see how children will talk about you? And Sam did such an awesome job with that. So,
well, thank you.
Absolutely. All right, listeners. I thank you so much. Feel free to like, subscribe, comment, share. We're NM Enterprise 7. Blessings to you.